Hi, and welcome to Live Healthy Now. I hope you're having a great day and thanks for listening. I've got a great guest with me today who's going to talk about a topic that definitely impacts every single one of you. April Likins is a stress management coach for overwhelmed, high-achieving women, and she really helps women who are struggling with stress and knowing how to manage it to reclaim their health and their lives. Because if you have ever suffered stress, you know what an impact it does play on your overall life. So April really focuses on helping you to understand what stress is, and we are going to really dig into that today to get clear on what it looks like, how it shows up in your life, and hear from April how it really showed up in her life and the journey she's been on to navigate stress and now live a much more balanced life. So welcome to the podcast, April.
Thanks so much, Nicola, for having me on the show. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, me too. And I love stress. Stress is one of my 5 pillars of wellness, and it's something that I think is so important for people to get a better understanding of. So just before we get into stress, I want to ask you what your most impactful healthy habit is in your lifestyle.
Gosh, there's so many. There's kind of 2 that have been working really well for me right now. One, I really love mindful walking, and just being outside in nature and unplugging. So often, like if I'm just going around the block in the neighborhood, I'll sometimes just leave my cell phone at home because it's just right up the street. And just focus on, the warmth and the sunshine and what's around me and listening to the birds and all of that and being able to unplug, and that too. And then I've been really at the start of COVID, I started unplugging my cell phone in the evenings. So I put it away after dinner, and that's just allowed me to have a couple hours in the evening of uninterrupted time, with my family without feeling like I've got to be responding to emails or social media messages and that sort of thing too. And both of those have been just really freeing habits for me.
Yeah, because it's so easy, isn't it, to always have your phone with you wherever you go. And certainly I walk a lot, but I always have my headphones in and a podcast on, but that's a really good tip to try being more mindful and just taking in what is right there in front of you when you're out walking. So I love that.
Yeah.
So talking about stress then, can you give us like a really easy to digest description of what stress is?
Yeah. So stress is essentially, it's just emotional unease. So it's really a disruption in our homeostasis, kind of what's normal for us. And the thing with stress is it just really varies based on our perception. So it's one of those things where, two different people can have vastly different stress responses. So if you think about traffic, right? We've all hit traffic when you're headed somewhere really important, or to a meeting or whatever, and you hit an obstacle and you're just at a standstill. And that's a pretty stressful situation for a lot of people, right? When you need to be somewhere urgently and there's nothing you can do. And so, that's an example of how people can look at that from a different perspective. So one person can totally flip out, and bang on the steering wheel and, just yell and have a meltdown and have this massive stress response in their body. Whereas another person can feel the stress and feel, oh my gosh, oh crap, this is not cool. But they choose instead to maybe do some deep breathing. They could pop on a meditation from an app, maybe, listening to your podcast, or calling somebody and catching up with someone while they're waiting, in that. And so it really varies based on our perception. But the one thing I often tell clients and people that's, if you don't take away anything else from this conversation, it's really one of the most important points is studies show it's not the stressors that are so toxic and dangerous, to our health, but it's our perception of them. So the key with stress is really, learning to respond in a way that just doesn't tear up your mental and physical health.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because you do come across people who really struggle with stress. They say, oh God, I'm stressed all of the time. And then there's other people who seemingly don't feel stressed. And I think this leads on to a question I had about, is all stress a bad thing? Is it that some people really don't feel stressed, or is it that actually the way they're responding to it means it doesn't impact them in the way we actually think is stress?
Yeah. Well, I think it's both. I mean, there's good stress and there's bad stress. And so an example of a good stressor would be working out. You get in a really good workout, you've hit it hard. Maybe it's outside, maybe it isn't, but your body is, sweats to kind of to cool down your whole system. So that would be a good example of a stress response. You might be prompted to drink some water. So maybe your electrolytes are a little imbalanced. That's a good stress response. Or you sprain your ankle, and your body, your ankle swells to really protect it from further injury. That's an example of the body responding to a stressor in a good and healthy way in that too. And so, but yeah, there are more people that are naturally, I think, more resilient than others, and they're able to overcome stressors maybe easier than other people are. But the good news is, resilience is really a skill set that anybody can learn, and you can build it like strengthening your muscles at the gym. The more you work out, the more you can see that definition in whatever body part you're working. And resilience is really the same thing. So it's good news for people that aren't naturally resilient, that it's something that you can just learn to develop over time, where the reality is, unfortunately, we live in a world where there's endless stressors, right? There's no way to live, a stress-free life. And if there is, and you find a great island, like, please send me a link where the island is and I will join you there. But that's just not the way, the world works. And so it's really about, reframing how we see stress and our relationship with stress, and making sure that we have resilience tools that we can use when we encounter those stressors. So those are things like, what we talked about, like, deep breathing, it's taking a step away, it's, having healthy boundaries, it's getting in some movement. Movement's wonderful for de-stressing, taking breaks, really listening to your body, getting connection in with other people. So important. Practicing mindfulness and self-care. So there's lots of different tools that you could use when those roadblocks and speed bumps and stressors pop up, so they don't completely derail you and catch you off guard.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And obviously there's a lot of people struggling with constant stress, or what might become chronic stress, as it's referred to in kind of medical terms. And this was something that played out in your life and had quite a significant impact on your health, didn't it?
It was, yeah, it did. And it happened, really, I guess back in 2013 after my dad died. So backing up, I really wasn't into health and wellness until probably 15, 20 years ago, when my dad was diagnosed with a really rare prostate cancer. So it was aggressive. He was really young. He was only 49. Oh, wow. And at the time, it was just this diagnosis. Yeah, he was super young, and it came out of left field. So it just, was something we weren't expecting. And at the time, they really gave him a 50-50 shot of surviving. And so that's kind of when I got into, looking into living a more healthy lifestyle and what's causing all the rise and all these diseases and autoimmune things that we're seeing the last few decades. And so we really revamped our lifestyle together, I began working out more, working out with him, eating healthier, doing a lot of different things. But then, and I totally, looking back, I really believe that prolonged his life and helped him to get a couple extra years, which I'm so grateful for, that we had that extra time together. But then he passed away, and then I kind of reverted back into my old bad habits, and I think that's an important lesson for a lot of us, because, life can be beautiful and amazing, but it can also be really hard and painful. And when the hard things in life happen, it's really tempting to turn to other things so that we don't have to feel our feelings. And, that can be anything from, binge watching Netflix to, workaholism to, shopping to, drinking more. I mean, any number of things to kind of block out those feelings. And so for me, I went right back into the workaholism, and I just really was burning the candle at both ends for a couple years until my health completely collapsed. And I was almost not able to get up for about a year and a half. So it was a really sudden and kind of devastating time for me too. And it took dozens of doctors to kind of figure out what was going on, and years really to pick up the pieces. And so, looking back, I really realized how that chronic stress cycle and how, hitting burnout after he died really set me up for weakening my immune system. And it caused this whole just chain reaction in my life. And like I said, it was a dark and really devastating and painful time for me, and years of trying to recover. But it's also, I believe that, things happen for a reason. And it inspired me to go back to school and pivot to become a health coach, really, so that I can help other people avoid the mistakes that I've made. So stress and burnout is a topic that I'm really passionate about. And I love helping people to avoid it and recover from it. And the good news is it's a lot easier to prevent burnout than it is to recover from it. Speaking from experience.
Definitely. So just taking a step back before you hit that burnout point, like, were you aware that you were feeling stressed, or was it just that there was so many things you didn't feel good? Like, could you put that stress label against it at that point in time?
Yeah, there were symptoms. And I think that's the thing with stress. A lot of times, the body is always communicating with us, like a car, the engine light on your car, where sometimes, it'll flash if you're low on fuel or your battery's running low or any number of things, it'll give you those warning signs, but we can choose to ignore it and keep driving the car if you want to. And the body's much like that. And so there were definitely warning signs for me. I was dealing with some fatigue, not sleeping well. My vision was kind of getting blurry and going in and out at times, just because I was pushing so hard. And, I think there was also, a lot of bad habits too. And that's, and some of those I think listeners can relate to, because there's a lot of habits that can, lead us to chronic stress and burnout. And so we touched on workaholism, but perfectionism was another thing that I was wrestling with, and kind of the inability to say no, and FOMO. And then, like I said, I was just not getting consistent movement. I mean, I'm a night owl, so I had gone back to just staying up to 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, skipping meals. I mean, the whole gamut of things, just really, just focusing on work, as a distraction method. But again, I think there was those warning signs all along, and the body eventually, it's always communicating with us, but over time it will get louder and louder and louder if we continue to ignore those warning signs.
Yeah. And that's the thing with both bad and good habits. The effects of them, the impact and outcome of them happen over time, don't they? So bad habits, you might think, oh, it's fine, I can stay up late, I can not sleep, I can worry, and it's fine, I can manage, deal with it. But over time, it has a compound effect, doesn't it? And it's the same with good habits. People start a good habit and think, well, I'm not seeing a result. What's the point in this? I expected to feel whatever it might be. But it builds up over time. And I think that's probably the biggest risk with stress, is that the warning signs, as you say at the start, are actually very small things that you probably tell yourself are just normal, that, it's normal to feel stressed and always be tired and, worrying about things. But actually over time, that does really add up and become a huge issue. So I want to talk about burnout, because certainly here in the UK, burnout is a term that is being used so frequently now. I think on the back of the pandemic, a lot of people have struggled with their mental health. Globally, obviously, the world's changed and we've been going through some really hard times. And there's definitely a much bigger awareness of stress and this thing called burnout. So, you talked about hitting burnout. What really is burnout? Is it that point when you do just, is it only when you can't do any more and get up? Or can it actually just be a bit of a breakdown, or, from an emotional point of view? Just, to tell us a little bit more about that and why you think it's on the rise as well.
Yeah. And so burnout, I feel like there's this kind of misperception that's perpetuating right now. And it's that Burnout is the syndrome, or it's a medical term, when in reality, it's like you said, it's this domino effect of these small things stacking up over time until you kind of reach this threshold or this breaking point with everything. So it's essentially, it's unmitigated chronic stress.
Right.
So it's chronic stress that hasn't been dealt with. And so, it shows up for everybody differently too. So it's, it can really look like complete, emotional and physical exhaustion. There's signs to watch out for that you might be experiencing burnout. And again, it shows up for everybody differently. So how it shows up for me may be totally different than how it shows up for you. But again, it's that exhaustion. You're feeling kind of cynical and about work, or you're dreading work, or you've got the Sunday scaries, where Sunday comes up and you're like, got all that anxiety about Monday. You may have more chronic headaches. Often stress shows up in headaches and migraines, in neck pain, back pain. Oftentimes stress can, show up in one area of the body too, as well. You might notice you have significant changes to your eating. So you may be eating less. You might be eating more. You might have a lot more of the cravings, where you've got we're craving the salty and the sugary and the high fat stuff. It's never the kale and the carrots and salad, when we're really stressed, and that too. Stomach aches are a big one too, that a lot of people experience when they're under too much stress. So you might have the stomach aches, you might have bloating, you might have some IBS symptoms in that too. And then insomnia is a big one. And it's been a big one the last 2 years. I mean, so many people are really struggling with their sleep. And so it's either having trouble falling asleep, or they just can't stay asleep too. But that can be another sign that you may be experiencing burnout. And just, there's a variety of feelings too, just feeling like, have no time for yourself, or family and friends, feel like you're working 24/7, or kind of like my story, where you're skipping meals and you're working through your lunch break, and you're working on the evenings and the weekends, or you're actually off, or you're on vacation and you can't unplug. Those can be just kind of signs and symptoms to watch out for, but it, really could show up with everyone differently. But the one tip that I always tell people, that's important to do, is just check in with yourself daily and ask yourself, what do I need today to thrive? Because the cool thing is the body will tell you. It's designed to course correct. And so you might find today that you're craving some sunshine and some fresh air. We were talking about walking earlier, and you're like, oh, I haven't had a walk in a while. I would really love to have a 20-minute walk today. Or maybe you need to slow down. You check in with yourself for 30 seconds and your body's like, okay, like we need to slow it down. You've been pushing really hard today. Or maybe you're dehydrated. You need a little bit of water, but it's going to change daily. But that's one of the most powerful tools that you can do, is just check in with yourself today and see what you need to thrive today, and, be responsive to that. Because I think a part of the burnout epidemic is that there's a couple things. I think one, it's the rise of the tech use, that we didn't have a few decades before. And it's wonderful, right? So tech is amazing. I mean, we're talking across the world right now, which, how cool is that? That's pretty amazing. But, the body's just not designed for this constant overstimulation, where, you constantly have notifications coming at us in 50,000 different ways. And of course, our devices are designed to be addictive. So you get that dopamine hit every time the notification comes in, and then it just kind of trains you to want to keep checking and that sort of thing too. So I joke with people, I'm like, gosh, I wish we could go back to the 90s when people just couldn't get a hold of you, from 50,000 different ways, from email and Slack and Instagram and Facebook and, everything, drones. I mean, it's like, it's crazy, it's like, there's so many different ways. But I also think too, we've become the society that really wears busyness as a badge of honor. We really take pride in this independence and grinding and the hustle and all that stuff too. And And thankfully, you're starting to see a shift and a tipping point in people saying, no, I don't have to live this way. I don't have to work 24/7. That's not the life that I want to live for myself, and that you can set those healthy boundaries. And then thirdly, I think the part of the rise in this epidemics is what we touched on a few minutes ago. We've just become disconnected to our bodies. We're not listening to them. And so those warning signs are there all along, but we've just learned to kind of put on the blinders, and ignore it and shut that down. And especially for high achievers, for people that are used to hustling and working really hard and achieving things, we are more prone to ignoring those warning signs.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that, because has like really cleared things. And those three things you explained there about why burnout is on the rise, I think you can see that, you can see it either in yourself or people or just what we're hearing about in the news. So I'm sure if you listen, you can associate with those three reasons, because the last one you mentioned about the busyness, or I think the second one wasn't the busyness, the badge of honour, and how so many of us think that that's the only way. I think from kind of the 70s through until very recently, the way that people work changed. Like it was before that, it was very industrial led, wasn't it? And things began to evolve, and technology changed that as well. And this whole kind of approach to work being something that has to be really long hours, and you have to be in front of a screen all of the time, and you have to be communicating, and you have to be available all of the time. That became what success was measured on, really, wasn't it, as we hit kind of the 2000s. Yeah. But now I think the pandemic has pressed the pause button, not everywhere and in every sector of business, but it's definitely made people reflect and go, the way I've been working wasn't healthy. And that certainly was the case for me. I used to travel a lot. I had a very demanding corporate job. And when I stopped going in the office because of the lockdown for the first bout of COVID, I suddenly realised why I was constantly on that edge of burnout, because I was always packing, thinking about being away from home and what I had to prepare, spending very sleepless nights in hotel rooms, having to be with people, and I'm a bit of an introvert, but having to socialise and go out with people and then travel back, 3 hours on a train and then in the car home and then catch up. So it was just a constant spin cycle of activity. Yeah. And I think people are starting to realise that, and sleep's a very similar thing, isn't it? That people have always thought it's a badge of honour to go, yeah, I don't need very much sleep, I'm great, I can manage on 4 hours. And likewise, I'm really busy. Yeah, I'm always busy. But now people are starting to realise that actually that is a huge negative impact on your overall health. And the last one about the body, I really love that, because you are absolutely right. I think we're living in such a fast-paced world, and our culture is one of huge need for instant gratification, that everything is about what we're doing, what we're seeing, what we're getting. And we've lost that connection. And my program is actually called Mind Body Collective, because it's really about bringing the mind massively back in tune with your body. Because I truly believe you can't be healthy, even if you were eating well and going to the gym and, sleeping okay. Yeah, you're going to feel pretty good. But unless you take care of your mind as well, and you really connect with who you are and what your values are, and knowing, how you want to live and be, then you're not ever really going to feel truly healthy and happy. So yeah, that's really clear. And I think just on the back of that, with the way our lives are, is it possible to still, for many of us, have to work in those ways and live the way we do in and out of work and successfully manage stress? Can you really manage it and get a good balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's up to each individual too, but I think it's really knowing what your non-negotiables are too, and so it's knowing when you want to work, when you don't want to work, setting those healthy boundaries, and working in a way that's sustainable. I think that's the key thing, and so often the pace at which so many people are working, is just at an astronomical pace that's just not sustainable long term. And so I think you're right. And you touched on a huge point that, these last 2 years have been crazy, right? For everybody, and stressful and all the things. But it's also given us this beautiful gift of being able to reevaluate our lives and say, is this the way that I really want to work and spend my time, and it also has shown us that, life is so much, it's fleeting, right? And it's precious. And there's so much more than just the grind, and the hustle all day long, and it's the power of connection and people in that too. And I think that's the biggest, one of the biggest devastating effects of all of this was the lack of connection that we had with each other, with all of the lockdowns and everything else. And then you really realize when you're able to see people again and see family members again, that power of connection and just that we need each other. And there's, and I think it's, you get to you read the stories of people that get to the end of their life and they're on their deathbed and they're thinking about, their lives and they're reflecting on it. And they're never thinking like, oh, I wish I got this title. Oh, I wish I made this salary. Oh, I wish I had, achieved this. It's like, I wish I hadn't been afraid to do that. I wish I had spent more time with the people that I love and care about. And, it's those sort of things. And so I think COVID was kind of a wake up call for a lot of us that, we can choose to live differently and you can decide, what those non-negotiables are for you and set those healthy boundaries in place so that you're not working 24/7 and you can really enjoy and live your life. Because the reality is it's meant to be enjoyed. Life is amazing and it's precious and we should be able to enjoy it.
Yeah. And I think you're talking about the book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. Have you read that one?
Yes, I haven't, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, definitely read it. I talk about it a lot actually on my socials because it definitely was a part of the journey to where I am now. I read it a couple of years ago, and exactly what you said there. We don't want to get to the end of our life and regret not spending time with the people we love or making choices that would have made us happy. And I think that's something that when you think about it like that, rather than being morbid, it's very empowering because we have only got one life. And as you say, we want to enjoy it. Everybody wants to live happier and better. Most people are still waiting to find the thing that makes them happy. But you can get in control of that. And I think, when you realize that as well, that really helps you to reassess your life in a way that would impact your stress levels, positively, because you're going to start to make changes that move away from always putting pressure on yourself and not having the right balance. And you mentioned there about non-negotiables. So what now are your non-negotiables that really help you to have that good balance, that stress isn't a devastating effect again for you in your future?
Yeah. So my husband keeps me in check because he knows I'm prone to workaholism. Right. So he will put me in check from time to time and he'll say, hey, you've been working a little too much today or this week. Like you need to slow it down, slow your roll a little bit, so that I've got the accountability from him, to slow down. But, I talked about those tech boundaries, that I've set in place. And so, putting it away in the evenings and, that's hard. And so initially I didn't just put it away for 2 hours. I started small. So I started putting it away 30 minutes before bed, and then gradually to an hour. And then I just kind of increased it over time. But the cool thing about devices, like we said, they're super designed to be addictive, right? And we all know that. And we're all addicted to them, even people that design the apps and design the phones, they're addicted to them. So it is what it is. But the amazing thing about that is they're very much out of sight, out of mind. So if you put them away where you can't see your cell phone, or your laptop or whatever it is, the temptation to want to check and check and check, it's virtually zero. So when you can't see it, if it's in another room or way across the room, that can be really empowering. So I also don't sleep with it beside my bed either, because that's another big one where I see a lot of clients and people getting tripped up too. Is they can't sleep. They wake up in the middle of the night. So what do? You grab your phone and you start scrolling. Well, that's problematic because that blue light, further suppresses your melatonin, and the melatonin helps you sleep. So, that's a problematic habit. But if you put it across the room, you have the physical barrier of, gosh, now I have to get up and like go across the room and look at it. Or some people, I have clients that keep it in the bathroom across from their bedroom, or they don't even put it in, it's just in another room in that too. But I'm mindful of not having it near me in that. And I also don't check it first thing in the mornings. And so I try to create mindful mornings. And so that's one thing that I love to talk to clients about is, we've all had those days, right, where it's crazy and you wake up, maybe you wake up a little late and like, you're just trying to get out the door. And it's the whole rest of your day is just totally nuts after that. And it's, there's a big difference between you running the day and the day running you. And so if you can just take a step back and have a few minutes in the morning, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I have to have 2 hours in the morning and get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and, do meditation for an hour and all this stuff. If you want to, that's great. But most people don't have that flexibility. But even if you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe before, you have to get going or the family wakes up, that sort of thing. That's where you can just have that space to breathe and be proactive with your day instead of reacting too. And so that could be reading something inspiring. It could be listening to your podcast. It could be just being strategic with your day, getting a little movement in, some deep breathing, whatever, just some sort of a routine that centers you in the morning. That's been very, very helpful for me to just have that ability to pause and be strategic with the morning too. And then I try to be intentional to schedule in fun and rest and connection and to really make time for movement and to make sure that I'm getting some form of movement daily. And it could be just a quick walk for 10 minutes. And the cool thing is, all movement is beneficial to the body. So if you can't get in a 30-minute workout or an hour workout, not a big deal. I mean, do what you can when you can, and even 10 minutes of moving and getting some quick fresh air, out around the block is still incredibly beneficial for the body. And walking, just like deep breathing, is, one of the quickest ways that you can regulate your nervous system and really switch from that fight or flight system that most of us are operating into that rest and digest system, which we're supposed to be operating in most of the time.
Yeah, and they're really good tips, and I'm all about movement. I talk a lot about that, and you're absolutely right in that any movement is good. And I try to encourage people to move regularly if they are at a desk-bound job, sitting in front of their screen most of the day, just to take an extra couple of minutes when they go to the bathroom, put the kettle on, get a drink, whatever it might be. Every time you're using your phone, stand up while you're using your phone. Try to walk around, especially if you're on a meeting that doesn't need you to be on camera. Could you even take that outside and get the daylight and the fresh air at the same time? So yeah, lots of little things like that can make such a big difference, can't they? And you touched there at the end about the fight or flight system. And I think that's something to really make people be aware of, is we shouldn't be in that state on a constant or frequent basis. And many of us are. And I think just to circle right back to what you started with, in that it's how we perceive it and how we respond to it. And many of us have learned the behavior of, when we feel that stress trigger, when that fight or flight kicks in, to go into full mode. I'm stressed. Oh, what am I going to do? That kind of reaction. And that can be changed in a new response and habit learned. And that's what then, you can manage it so that those people we referenced who are much better at stress, some people are naturally that way, but others have realised that's the best way to respond and make sure that they don't then have, a negative health effect because of it. So for anyone listening who is thinking, I do really need to do something because I know that I am regularly feeling stressed and it is causing lots of different symptoms and effects, what would be one thing that you could suggest they do in the next day or two, that simple step to take forward to just start on that road to creating more balance and calm?
Yeah, I would say start with deep breathing. I really love the 4-7-8 method. So it's super simple. You can do it anywhere. You can do it in your car. You can do it when you're in a meeting, and just it's breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 7, and then breathing out for 8. And that's, just do that 4 or 5 times, and that can quickly, again, switch off that fight or flight system. So that's a super simple technique that anybody can do anywhere, getting some, just some movement in, moving in a way that you enjoy doing. So if you're not a runner, don't run. If you don't want to be doing CrossFit and crazy workouts, like, that's fine. Maybe you enjoy Pilates, or maybe you enjoy bar or yoga. It's just moving your body in some sort of form daily can be a huge stress reliever. Getting out in nature is another big one. It doesn't take much time. I mean, you can literally go outside for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And that has a really powerful effect on, our mental and physical health and our energy levels too. I mean, you're hearing about, the term rewilding the last few years is what it's called, and it's getting back into nature. But it's pretty cool where you're seeing doctors globally actually prescribing it to patients. In the office, they're writing it on the notepad, like, good to get outside, here's a prescription for 10 minutes a day. But that can do wonders for your soul and your whole entire health, to just get outside when you can, like you said, which is a wonderful example. If you've got to be on meetings and you don't have to be on camera, turn the camera off and go for a walk, while you're on the meeting. Or, like we talked about, it could just be mindfully being outside. So putting your phone away and just sitting outside for 5 minutes and 10 minutes, and just close your eyes and just listen to, the sounds and feel the warmth of the sun, and, just have a little pause. That's a big thing that I talk about often to clients and a lot of people, is that there's power in pausing, and it sounds so counterintuitive to those of us that are hustlers and we're the high achievers, to slow down. But rest really is the antidote to burnout. You cannot, keep a crazy pace long term without rest and without fun and connection, and not hitting burnout. So that's a big one. And then sleep. I know we touched on it a little bit, but I always tell people, sleep is the superpower to bouncing back from stress and becoming resilient, because it's just again, like you touched on, it's like, it's gotten a bad rap, over the years, and in the Industrial Revolution and all of that, where, it's like you've all heard the things, you snooze, you lose, and I'll sleep when I'm dead. And we've all heard those terms, and again, it's been worn as kind of like a bragging right of, I only need 4 hours or 5 hours and that sort of thing too. But the body is doing incredible things in the middle of the night. It's lowering your cortisol levels. It's helping to regulate your blood sugar metabolism. It's categorizing memories, to help you think better and more clearly. It's wiping proteins away in the brain that are linked to cognitive diseases and decline. And so in some areas, studies have even shown that there's some areas of the brain when we're in that REM state, which is this restorative sleep that we're really after, that we need to feel our best inside and out, are lit up and more active than even when we're awake too. And so first, it's really, reevaluating your relationship with sleep, and then making sure, you're getting that quality 6 to 8 hours, or 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, and making that a priority. And again, starting small. So, if your goal, first know your sweet spot, know where you feel your best inside and out, and what's that number for you, that when you wake up the next day, you feel really good. And then aiming to kind of make that a priority, every day too.
Yeah. As you were talking through those, I was thinking, and I hope if you're listening, maybe you've picked up on this too, is that every one of those things are free. Every one of those things we can do on our own. Breathing, pausing, stepping outside, movement. None of those things need you to invest any money, to have equipment, to get help to do. They're all very easy things. And that brings us nicely back to what you talked about with that connection to our bodies, that whole mind body connection of knowing what causes your stress, what helps to relieve it, what makes you feel good, what you need. As you said, that can change and does change day to day. So I think that's the message I would say to take away is, it's you and your body, and you can easily do some of these very simple things. The breathing one, and just to check, that's breathing in through the nose for 4 and then out through the mouth. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, because I love that I do different breath work. I prefer breath work type things to the meditation. And so, yeah, that something like that you can do that whilst you're sitting at your desk. If you feel yourself start to get stressed, let's just breathe. And that's the pause as well, isn't it? It's just let's pause and repower yourself. But couldn't agree more with sleep. Again, that's one of my pillars, and it's something that so many people undervalue. And as you said, wear that badge of honor of, well, I'm fine without sleep. I'll sleep when I'm gone, life's for living sort of thing. But yeah, so many benefits to sleep, and you explained that really well there. So I've really enjoyed.
And then one other thing I would just add is, as all the things that we talked about, thinking of them as resilience tools, and so much of health and wellness. And I know you know that. And so for some listeners listening, they understand that too. It's like, there's not a one size fits all for those resilience tools. And so it's treat a lot of it as experimentation, and how you like to move and where your sleep sweet spot is. And maybe you like deep breathing, maybe you don't, maybe you like meditation, maybe you don't. And that's okay. But trying these new techniques and just seeing what works for you, because it's going to be different for everyone. And so the key is just coming up with some different tools in your tool belt that you can use when you do encounter, the curveballs and the stressors and the things that pop up. And then you've got those in place to utilize.
Absolutely. And that's what the purpose of this podcast is to help people to see that it's not a one size fits all approach. I talk about it being like a box of chocolates, because you pick out the ones that are your favorites, that you need, that work for you. And you're the second person that I've spoke to this week that has referenced that toolbox type analogy of, you've got it there and you use what you need based on what's going on at that point or season of your life. And that's exactly what, people need to realize is it doesn't have to be everything. It's not about conforming to things a lot of people think living healthy is. It's literally finding those small, simple steps that make a difference and adding to them, building them as habits and so on. So I really like that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I love the chocolates thing. Gosh, now I'm wanting chocolate.
Well, that's the only,
that's a great analogy. A box of chocolates. I love it.
I know. And I think it's quite good as well, because I want people to know that as a health and wellness coach, you can absolutely talk about and eat chocolate. There's no shame in that whatsoever.
Yeah. All things in moderation.
Exactly. And a bit of dark chocolate's definitely good for us as well, isn't it? And the stress levels. So if anyone wants to connect, do you want to just share where they can find you, April, and how they can get a little bit of support from you? I know you've got an amazing free guide that helps. It was something I actually downloaded, I think a few months ago when I heard you on another podcast, and really liked what you were talking about. And I thought it was really simple and easy to get in and use straight away.
Yeah, listeners can connect with me on my website. It's my name, so it's aprillikins.com, or on Instagram. The handle is different. It's Globe Lovely. And you're right, I have that new free resource I put out a few months ago called 15 Ways to Say Goodbye to Chronic Stress for Good. And so if you didn't take notes, I've got you covered there. And plus it covers some other things that we didn't talk about, but it's just really geared towards helping you to have some tools to quickly lower your stress levels, find balance, and increase your joy. And so again, that's at aprillikins.com too. And if you're listening and you're struggling with stress and sleep and balance, and you're not sure where to start, reach out. I'm happy to have a coffee chat with you to see if there's anything that I can do to help you and cover those hidden stressors too. And just say hello. I always love hearing from listeners. So if you enjoyed our conversation or you found anything helpful, drop me a message on social media. I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And I'll put everything into the show notes that you can connect with April. And honestly, if you are feeling like that, as you said, do reach out. There's so much support out there for people who are struggling. And, if anything's resonated with you and you just want to know a little bit more about how you would put this into your life and routine, then definitely connect with April and find out more and start, with that guide where you can, to give yourself some great tips. So it's been incredible. I've loved it because it's such an important topic and you talk about it so clearly as well. I think in a way that everyone can relate to and take something away from. So
Thank you.
for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. And it was lovely talking to you today. And I really hope listeners found our conversation helpful. So thanks so much.
Me too.